Have you seen my magic hammer? I call it Thumb Thwacker. What's going on, geeks, gamers, and everything in between? It's the month of November, and that means we saw a movie in theaters.
Was I supposed to pick up on that?
We'll get our charisma back.
Jump cut it.
Okay. We saw a movie, and this time was Thor Ragnarok.
That's how he pronounced it the other 5 times we tried to record this.
Thor Ragnarok. It's a little bit chilly around where we live. Means it's like 72, 73 degrees.
It was 71 earlier.
Oh, it was brutal.
It was brutal.
It's totally brutal. But I get to wear my favorite jacket now. That means Jeremy's favorite jacket. He's asked to borrow it several times.
Yeah, so we can go be Geeks of Anarchy, apparently.
Geek fits. Miss Geeks. Something. No? Okay.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it. Thor Ragnarok, of course, the third film in the Thor franchise. New director, Taika Waititi. All the cast members returning that you could ever want. Anthony Hopkins, Chris Hemsworth, Tom Hiddleston, and some new faces, Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum. Who's there? Playing Jeff Goldblum.
Playing
There's
the
nothing
Grandmaster
better. There's nothing better than Goldblum playing Goldblum.
He's Goldblum.
He's
That's
Goldblum.
basically what it is.
So.
Of course, this film had a lot of hype about it. A lot of people coming out saying it's the funniest Marvel movie of all time. A lot of people also from the trailers were saying it looks too much like the Guardians of the Galaxy. Mm-hmm. I actually had some of my own concerns, some fears going into the film. It's a good film, and I had a lot of fun with it. However, it feels like they really just copied the template of Guardians of the Galaxy, like, to the T. And the reason I don't like that is it would have worked, except the first two movies, like, it suffers from its first two movies. It's such a huge, tonally different change that the Thor that you get in this one is, like, really jokey, really funny, really loosey-goosey, right? And he's not that in any of the other two films. And for me, the humor of Thor works, like, when he's on Earth and he doesn't understand certain things.
Right.
Like fish out of water. In this one, some of the jokes worked. A lot of them really didn't for me. And some of the jokes, like, they needed to just cut the joke halfway through. Like, the beginning, we'll call it the spinning chain joke, right?
Mm-hmm.
It went a little too long. And this is coming from a comedian.
At times, it felt like a parody.
It really did.
Characters.
It really did. Little too many jokes. Like, and what's really bad about that for me is that the really good jokes, like, I didn't at least laugh as hard at the really good ones because I was like, oh, joke. Oh, good joke.
I noticed that about you in the theater.
Yeah, I didn't. You had some good laughs.
I've cried like twice.
Yes,
laughing
you had
so
some good.
hard.
And I'm saying, like, some of the jokes were really good.
Yeah.
The last Bruce Banner joke was hilarious. But there were so many jokes leading up to it in such a short amount of time.
It was overkill jokes.
I do appreciate, though, them trying to give a visual continuity to Cosmic Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that when you're watching the film, this is Cosmic Marvel. But I also feel that they didn't do enough to really separate it from Guardians. Like, this is Thor in Cosmic Marvel, and this is Guardians in Cosmic Marvel.
Well, see, before you follow up more of your points, I thought it was a weird movie. I liked it.
Definitely.
I didn't love it. I liked it. My big problem has been leading into this movie is fear of the Marvel formula that a lot of people have been talking about. That's not a concern in this movie.
No.
It's not the Marvel formula. A lot of what they did worked. Some of it didn't work. It didn't take itself too seriously
Not at all.
enough. It was very little serious moments, at least as far as I was concerned. A lot of the jokes, like I said, a couple of them made me cry. I was crying. But for the most part, there were times where it felt like a legit SNL parody of these characters. And I was like, man, it kind of took me out of it a lot. So I think that, again, for the majority of what they wanted to do worked. They needed to do something different with Thor because he is kind of a boring character.
Well, they made him a boring character.
Yeah.
He's not supposed to be, really.
Right. And I mean, I hated Thor: The Dark World. I couldn't stand it. And I'm not a big fan of the first Thor. This is definitely the best Thor movie for me, but that's not saying a whole lot. But I did like it a lot. I did.
See, I think I would have appreciated the movie a lot more if even, like, the film before it, The Dark World, took this totally different change. Because right now, like, going into it, it's like, it's cool, but it's also a little off-putting.
It's a massive jump in tone. Massive.
And then, you said weird, and I kind of want to focus on that.
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing about this film, and also I think the thing that's not going to work for a lot of people, is the fact that it really jumps into a lot of the weird stuff that actually goes on in Thor comic books. Now, I know you didn't read Thor back in the day.
Right.
I was a huge Thor fan, including Thunderstrike. And the reason I bring that up is there's a part where Thor has his umbrella, and it's actually Mjolnir in disguise, and that's a Thunderstrike kind of thing. But it really does dive deep into the weirdness of Thor comic lore and whatnot. And then, of course, the film also has this, it makes me feel like I'm watching a live-action Heavy Metal. You remember the cartoon Heavy Metal, and then there was Heavy Metal 2000. It was a long-running magazine series. I think it actually still runs. It really had that kind of feeling to it, especially with the music. And that was one of the first things that I thought, like the opening scene, it's very sci-fi fantasy. And when he's flying away from the monster, like all I could think of was this is Heavy Metal in live action.
Yeah, I mean, that was a cool scene, by the way, too. That was a really cool scene. And visually, I mean, you know, it does have this kind of streamlined feel with Guardians of the Galaxy, but I do think it stood on its own in certain ways from a visual standpoint. Beautiful movie. For some reason, we have the 80s vibe, but it doesn't take place in the 80s, which kind of comes into the weird aspect of things. I thought that Cate Blanchett, I thought she was over the top at times. It just felt out of place. She's one of the best actresses in the world. So, I mean, but it felt a little over the top for me. And again, when it comes down to things in Marvel movies, it's the stakes. I never feel the stakes in these movies because I know nothing's going to happen. I know no major character is going to die, things like that. And again, I did like this movie, and I'll probably see it again. It's funny as hell. Some of the jokes are just over the top though, and there's no real heart in it, and that's where Guardians separates itself from me. Guardians has heart,
definitely,
and emotion,
and I think
on top of the comedy.
I think part of that is my other kind of concern going into it was, early reports came out that the film was going to be a really brisk 2 hours long. Now, anybody who's ever watched our reviews knows that I'm usually like, they probably could have shortened this film up. In Thor, this one, there's so much going on. Nothing has a chance to really breathe or for you to like really, get into it. All the stuff that had to do with like, Thor and Bruce Banner Hulk, they had hyped the movie up. Oh, it's going to be like a buddy cop movie or it's, buddy. They don't really spend a lot of time together, like really figuring things out,
It's more Loki and Thor.
Right. More Loki and Thor, and a lot of the issues that they're dealing with, like with Odin, what happens with Odin, and all the stuff between Loki and Thor, that was stuff that really needed more time to breathe and really simmer.
I agree.
And it also feels like a lot of that stuff should have been set up in the first two movies. And some of it was like little bits of it, but they weren't main focuses. Like this movie should have culminated all of that stuff. And instead, you get this thing again that feels like it suffers because of the first two movies.
I felt beat over the head with the jokes. I'd never felt that way in Guardians.
Right.
I get Guardians has a lot of jokes, but there's just enough emotion and heart in those movies where I never felt, overwhelmed with the jokes. And this one, it was constant.
And that's the thing I think about the suffering from the first two films is that you don't have that same kind of like love of the chemistry of the characters, right?
Right.
You get to this movie, and even if there is something that's kind of heartwarming, you're like, whatever, right? The only thing that you could have really had any sort of feeling for would have been Jane and Thor. But, of course, Natalie Portman's not in these films anymore. And there was a funny joke, though.
We are being a little negative, I think, and that's not going to be reflective in my score, because my score is going to be a little more positive than what we're conveying right now. But there is a lot of good in this movie. So don't think that we're talking about, and that's basically... Negatives are because of the expectation. You go into it. Rotten Tomatoes scores like 95%. I get it. Hopefully you understand. Hopefully you understand how Rotten Tomatoes works, though. It doesn't mean that it just means that most people, 95% of people, found it positive. So that could be like a 7 out of 10.
Right.
And so I can understand that. I don't really see a lot to dislike about this movie or hate. I just think it's funny. It's a little strange, tonally different from anything we've seen in the Thor franchise, and you just can't really feel any of the stakes. But that's every Marvel movie as far as I'm concerned.
True.
So
True. But I mean, like I said when I started off, it was a good film. I had a lot of fun with it. Very colorful, very bright. I really wish man, I gotta focus on some of these negatives. I really wish they would have focused a little more on the Planet Hulk storyline. They kind of have
They did touch onto it.
Yeah, but
good more than I thought they would.
oh man, if they could have, like, they had a revolution, but Hulk wasn't in. I'm not even gonna go in that spoiler territory. But so what'd you score it at?
I'm gonna give it I'm between a 7.5 and an 8, and we typically don't do like 7.75. So I'm gonna stick with a 7.5. I think that's where I'm gonna fall on a second viewing. So 7.5 out of 10. It's funny. It put me in tears in some of the scenes. I just felt a little beat over the head with the jokes, and the tone was such a drastic change. But I'm being a little hypocritical because I never liked the Thor movies before.
Right.
And so the tone is just, but still, is such a drastic jump. So 7.5 out of 10.
I'm giving it a 6.5 out of 10, actually.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
I am.
All you Rotten Tomatoes people, send the hate mail to him.
That's
That's
right.
right. Wait, we're not on Rotten Tomatoes.
Not yet.
No,
Not
we're
yet. We'll be there.
enough.
We'll be
We're
there.
not good enough.
And that's not to say that you shouldn't go see this movie. You really should. It's a lot of fun. But when it comes down to actually critiquing the film, you have to score it not just on the film itself, but on the fact that it is part of a larger series, and not the MCU, but it's a trilogy, right? And I don't feel that it did anything to really resolve any of the issues with the first two films, any of the storylines, plot lines, so and so. In reality, it kind of was just a bridge to the larger story going on.
But that's every Marvel movie.
It is, but I mean, even still, Captain America still resolved, its plot lines. Iron Man still resolved its plot lines. Yeah. This one was just kind of like, hey, we're giving you this brand new Thor. And in all honesty, if it wasn't for using the same characters from the other two films, it could have been a standalone film. It
could have been a random sci-fi movie on Sci-Fi Channel. That's kind of how out of place it felt at times.
Yes.
A big budget sci-fi movie on the Sci-Fi Channel if you took the characters and just switched them. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna be. I think this is gonna be one of the more divisive MCU movies
for sure.
Age of Ultron is one of them. But I think Iron Man 3, not so much. Most people understand that's just not a good movie.
It's not. No.
So, but I think this is going to be divisive. I think we've got a DCEU type of movie right here.
I think people are going to like it, right? But I think when it comes to actually critiquing the film, and having to take in, everything into account, you're either going to score the film based on its own merits, right? Or, based on its own merits and then as a part of that, trilogy. And unfortunately, it's not a standalone film. If it was, I'd be a lot more up on it, at least score-wise.
I'd be interested to know how a general audience person views it, because people that are
general audience, right out there.
All right,
you people, let us know.
Let us know.
Seriously.
That's a nice segue.
Yeah.
I've been teaching him. But, I'll be interested to know, how does the mother that doesn't keep up with the MCU, or the dad that spends all the time, working, or, the kids or whatever, how are they going to view it? How is we had an older couple that was in the theater with us. How are they going to view that? Because they're obviously not in Facebook groups arguing with people like you.
I want to know what the two people sitting in front of us that kept getting up to go get snacks and soda every 15 minutes thought about the movie, or if they even really watched it.
Or they could just stay at home next time and not annoy the shit out of people. How about that?
And just up and down.
How about that?
Up and down.
Anyway, I'll wrap this up because he's just going to keep ranting.
Up and down!
Anyway, thank you guys very much for checking out this video. Check out geeksandgamers.com. We have amazing articles, reviews. Check out Geek Pulse Radio. That's our podcast network. He's trying to show off this t-shirt, but it's not Geeks and Gamers approved, even though he put a Geeks and Gamers logo on it.
I'm
kidding.
Geeks and Gamers.
It's a Geeks and Gamers.
Oh, okay.
I was kidding.
He's
kidding.
See,
anyway, if you guys like this video, please subscribe, share the video, pass the word. Let all your friends know that we either suck or we're great. Either way, if you talk about us, that's good for us. So, for Kiku, I'm Jeremy. You guys have a great night. We'll talk to you later.
Keep it nerdy.